The French magazine Le Monde published an article about France's greatest geopolitical defeat, its expulsion from its former African colonies, which, although nominally considered independent countries, continued to be in colonial dependence on France. Formally giving freedom to these countries kept siphoning off all sorts of resources, because African countries didn't have the technology to extract them themselves, paying literally cents for them, as well as entangling these countries in huge debts. Who are the ones, despite siphoning off all sorts of resources from them, couldn't give since the middle of the last century and couldn't give to anyone? Precisely because all they got from their resources of succulent cuts of meat were bones. These are new kinds of colonialism, which can be called by the terms financial and technological colonialism. And now, with the support of Russia, African countries have begun the second stage of the liberation struggle. The first was realized with the support of the Soviet Union, when they gained formal independence. They are driving the French out of their territory one country after another. Here's what else the French edition says. France is withdrawing from Niger, where it thought it would find refuge for its troops already expelled from Mali. To scant consolation, Paris hopes to organize this withdrawal in an orderly fashion, unlike the disastrous evacuation of Americans from Kabul in 2021. Orderly or chaotic and independent of order of magnitude. The point of these digressions remains unchanged. It is the retreat of the Western power, signifying the failure of its military interventions in the southern countries. Retreat is not only military. On diplomatic and political fronts, the West, a word that has been understood since the Cold War to mean the democracies of NATO's Atlantic Alliance, Japan and Australia are also being forced to abandon it. End quote. On the evening of May 24, 2021, Mali's interim president Ba Ndao and the head of the transitional government, Mokhtar Wan, were taken by a military team to Kadi army base. They were released on the night of May 27. They resigned. Vice President Assimi Goïta, for his part, said he would take over as Mali's president for a transitional period until mid-2022. The position of vice president will remain vacant. On July 26, 2023, a group of military officers from Niger's Presidential Guard mutinied and announced the ouster of President Mohamed Bazoum. The commander of the Presidential Guard, General Abdurrahman Chiani, became head of the transitional government. The MES magazine forgot to tell about another country that also had a military coup and ousted a pro-Western president in July 2023. This country is Gabon, and already on September 4, Gabon's transitional president, Brice Oligui Nguema, was sworn in. Let us take a look at what these three countries, Mali, Niger and Gabon, are rich in. Mali is considered one of the largest gold deposits on the continent. There are diamonds, uranium, bauxite, semi-precious stones, phosphate, gypsum, limestone and marble. Despite the country's rich natural resources, Mali remains a relatively poor state with a large debt. Niger has significant reserves of oil, uranium, coal, gold, bauxite and most importantly lithium. Among the minerals Gabon has manganese, diamonds, gold and uranium. Gabon has huge deposits of manganese estimated at over 21 million metric tons. This resource is in high demand in global markets. The country has the sixth largest proven oil deposits on the continent. Oil reserves estimated at 3.5 billion barrels. There are huge reserves of natural gas, estimated at more than 28 billion cubic meters. And now all this wealth, with the slightest movement of an unknown hand, is floating away from the hands of the French neo-colonizers. We will definitely help these countries to extract resources, because they will not be able to extract them on an industrial scale without technological assistance from the West. And we will also establish trade and economic relations with them in all other areas. On June 14, 2023, President of the Russian Federation Vladimir Putin had a telephone conversation with President of the Transitional Republic of Mali Assimi Goïta. The sides discussed topical issues of bilateral cooperation of mutual interest in the areas of mutual interest. They also discussed trade and economic ties, including supplies of Russian wheat to Mali, as well as fertilizers and fuel. Of course, these countries will have to pay their debts to the West. However, when they become masters of their resources and can extract them without Western companies. But with Russian participation, then with a fair distribution of income. And this is the only approach our country takes with other countries. They will easily repay their outstanding early debts, and then start building up their wealth. Will become solvent and wealthy. And then the African market will be a lacquer piece for the rest of the world. But by then, this African market will most likely be oriented not toward the West, but toward non-Western countries, and even more likely toward Russia. Besides wheat and fertilizer, which are on everyone's lips, let's see what we have to offer Africa that is badly needed and highly exclusive. Why, for example, would a nigger buy American Boeing airplanes? First, they are expensive, and second, as soon as some American president gets off on the wrong foot, the US can impose sanctions and deprive any country of its entire fleet of airplanes. At the same time, Russia will soon produce its entire line of civilian aircraft entirely from its own components, something no other non-Western country, including China, can do anymore. The only question before us is how to dramatically increase their production, and I hope it will be solved. And it will also be the construction of power plants, including nuclear power plants, railroads, and other infrastructure, with the participation of our state corporations. After all, even our private construction companies will be eager to start exploring the expanses of Africa when people there have the opportunity to move from shanty towns to nice new apartments and houses. Well, another shining example of how we can and will help African countries get the most out of their resources was the announcement of the results of the talks between Vladimir Putin and South Sudan's President Salva Kiir. First of all, let me quote Salva Kiir: "I am here as the first step on the long road of our work together in the future. We are the youngest nation on the planet. We need to have strong, influential friends, of which you are one. We don't see any alternatives to being friends with you. That, friends, is how we are recognized by Africa as a strong and influential country. Isolation, though." Vladimir Putin said that a Russian company will build an oil refinery in that country in 2 stages. That is, they will stop exporting cheap raw materials and will supply the world market with finished oil products, gasoline, diesel fuel, oils and other refined products with high added value. Thus, it is time for the French out of Africa to get out. As long as it can be done the good way, not the bad way, as the Americans did in Kabul. They only have to grit their teeth and say, "He gave up the post," and we can calmly answer them, "He accepted the post." Well, I'll also list a few other interesting developments from the African continent. Sylvain Ede has finally left Niger. This is the former French ambassador to Nigeria, in the early hours of Wednesday, September 27, aboard a plane specially dispatched by the French authorities. As Emmanuel Macron said last Sunday, all that remains is to remove the 1,500 French soldiers stationed in the country by the end of the year to finally seal the end of military cooperation between Niger and the former colonial power. Just as Meli Actu writes, France is leaving Niger, the US and Germany may follow suit. The United States, which has 1,100 soldiers in Niger, for its part has signaled that it is evaluating options for a possible withdrawal. Germany warned last week that its 100 soldiers stationed in Niger could also leave if France chooses that option. Another media outlet writes Octa Niger, quote, Burkina Faso, 4 officers arrested and 2 more on the run after a failed coup attempt. Burkina Faso announced Tuesday it had thwarted a proven attempted coup d'état. According to a government spokesperson, several people involved in this destabilization attempt have been arrested, while others are being actively sought. Vito Masti writes, Putin met with Libyan National Army Commander-in-Chief Haftar. He discussed with the head of the LNA the situation in Libya and the North African region. RIA Novosti wrote, Putin met with Kadyrov. They discussed the situation in the Republic, the social sphere, and the participation of Chechen fighters in the special military operation. Here we should add that Kadyrov's visit to the Kremlin apparently coincidentally coincided with the arrival of Libyan Caliph General Haftar. Both are wars of Allah. And there's another interesting piece of news. Putin at a meeting with Deputy Defense Minister Yunus-Bek Yevkurov and former Wagner Chief of Staff Andrei Troshev said, Andrei Nikolaevich, at the last meeting we talked about the fact that you will be engaged in forming volunteer units that can perform various combat tasks, first of all, of course, in the conflict zone. You yourself have fought in such a unit for more than a year, you know what it is, how it is done, you know about the issues that need to be addressed in advance, so that the combat work goes in the best and most successful way.